Hi everyone, welcome back to The Mystic in the Woods. I'm Kate, and today we are going to be talking about decks that I resisted, decks that I hate to love, these types of things. Now here's what I mean by this. There are a variety of decks in my collection that I have come to love, that have come to be cornerstones of my collection, that I actively resisted buying, that I remember seeing, in a YouTube video or online and thinking, that deck is not for me, I don't like the artwork, fill in the blank. And over time, decided to give the deck a try anyway, and then was actually quite surprised by the deck. So these are the decks that we're talking about. Or decks that I kind of have like a teenage relationship with, like I don't want to love it, but for some reason I still do. So let's get started. So the first one we're going to talk about and get out of the way is the Archetypes deck. Now, I just did a full review of this, so you can go find that on the channel from a few weeks ago. And this is one of those decks that has been around for a very long time. I actively resisted buying it. I do not like round decks. I do not particularly care for the artwork. I do not like the backing. And historically, it has been very hard for me to work with a deck if I don't like the backing. And I don't mean just like, it doesn't have to be my favorite backing. I mean, if I have a deck with a backing I actively dislike, it is actually quite difficult for me to work with that deck long term, which is silly because we aren't using the deck for the backing, we're using the deck for the art on the front, but there it is. So if you want to hear me talk more about this deck, you can go look at that full review, where I was very honest about the things I love about this deck, the things that I hate about this deck, but I also put it on my top 10 mass market decks. After I started using it for a while, after I got over the fact that I don't like round decks, that I don't like the backing, it has become an absolute cornerstone in my own personal card practice, and I think it will be appearing for clients and students in shadow work very soon. Talk about the Earthbound Oracle next. Now, this deck I use almost exclusively with my Hush Tarot. That's probably not true. It is actually the reverse. When I'm working with my Hush Tarot, this is 98% of the time the Oracle deck that is going to come out with it. I do use this Oracle deck with other tarot cards, tarot decks. Now, this deck, again, I actively resisted. I resisted it because I think this was one of the first decks that was on my radar as a new reader, and I did not understand how you could read with something like this. Like when I was new and I saw this air card, I was like, I don't, what do you do with that? I didn't understand. So this deck had been on my radar as a new reader for quite a while. I just didn't understand it. I thought that the artwork was a little bit creepy, which I was having a hard time with at that time. I do much better with darker artwork now, and I see the value in it, even though it may not be always my first choice. So this deck I really resisted actively. Like, I would see it online and I'd be like, not for me. Not for me. Don't understand it, don't like it, not for me. But when I purchased the Hush Tarot, I purchased this as well, I think because Racine over on Owl Moon 513 had paired them together. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give it a try. And by then I was a more experienced reader. And I am so glad that I did. This is one of my top Oracle decks. I don't know, honestly, that would make like a top 10 list at this point, just because I have so many Oracle decks that I'm absolutely in love with and would not part with under any circumstances. But it's up there, and it may make the top 10 list. It is simple. The artwork is simple, but there's still enough there to really work off. So for example, here's the labor card. And we've got we've got the keyword, we've got the bee, we've got the honey, we've also got like multiple honeycombs, there's also a flower. There's actually a lot of ways you can go with this card. So I find this deck to be an excellent clarifier to tarot, and it goes really well with a lot of decks. Actually, one deck that I've just started pairing it with is the Silver Acorn Tarot. Since this is here, I'll just mention this. So I've just started pairing these together, and I have been really enjoying this pairing. So the Earthbound Oracle, one of the decks on my list of actively resisted it and purchased it anyway, and then fell in love with it. All right, so let's do a newer deck next. So this is the Love Oracle of Eden, and this is of course a newer deck, so I obviously didn't resist it that long. But when this deck came out, even maybe before when some people had advanced copies of it, I remember seeing it around and thinking like, it's not for me. It's pretty, the artwork's not for me. I don't know how I would use a deck with these types of keywords or this type of theme. Like I didn't really know how I would like use this deck, right? Let me see if the so the box says the Love Oracle of Eden. Love Oracle of Eden is an oracle deck that encourages us to focus on love. Love with a capital L. Love for our partners, romantic interests, families, friends, ourselves, and other loved ones. A deck that encourages to seek ultimate harmony, meaning, and joy. Able are also to create a life of love, intention, balance in one's relationships with others and themselves. So I didn't really know, like, I understood the concept, right, of like self-love, love for others. Like, I understand why they created this deck, but I didn't know how I would use it. So I resisted it because I also didn't, when I first saw it on various accounts, the artwork just didn't speak to me and it really wasn't for me. So I thought. Then I decided to give it a try for 2 reasons. First of all, when we're doing shadow work, we are very often looking at coping mechanisms, behaviors, reactions, triggers we wish we didn't have, stuff we don't particularly love that we have, or fears that we have, or wounds that stuff about us that we are not at first glance happy about, right? Now, of course, when we talk about shadow work, like, we're also uncovering authentic pieces of us and all these good things also. But one of the challenges with shadow work that I think we can have, but really opens the door to healing, is when we can bring love to those pieces of us. So every reaction you have, every behavior that you have that you don't particularly like, that stems from something in your shadow or some, childhood trauma or whatever, all of those behaviors are simply serving to keep you safe. They are trying to keep you safe. And that is something that we can love. We can say, I love that you got me to this point. Behavior, my inner child, usually the inner child's at the root of a lot of this, and I can say, I love my inner child. I love that she got me to this point. I love that she did everything she could to keep us safe. And I will take it from here. I will now set that down. I will heal that, and I will take it from here. So a lot of times when we're doing shadow work, one of the pieces that we want to be looking at is, how can I bring more love to this aspect of me as I work to integrate it, as I work to heal it? So this deck is turning out to be very powerful for that. I also have just started sort of formally walking down a priestess path, right? So I'm doing some really intensive training, and my mentor is always, the mentor that I'm working with is always talking about how we're trying to walk as love, which is not the same as love and light and being pushed over and staying, whatever. You guys can watch my wounded light videos to know how I feel about all that stuff. But when we are confronted with a difficult situation and we want to know, how can I move as love through this situation? This type of a deck can really help you do that. Do I need to be more present? Loyalty. Unity. Empowered. So do I need to empower myself in this situation? So I have been finding this deck to be very powerful. I've been using this a lot this winter in combination with actually this deck, which we will talk about next. So this is, what is this? The Soul Mirrors Oracle. And I have been using this in combination with the Love Oracle of Eden. I don't know why I can never remember that deck name. This deck, again, I actively resisted, and this is a newer deck. I've got older decks sitting here next. I just remember seeing a few different unboxings of it, seeing it appear in a few different places, and the artwork felt, not me. I didn't particularly, something about the artwork I just didn't particularly like. As I continued to see it more, I'm working on shadow work for myself and, with others, starting down this priestess path, I'm loving the idea that this has 3 keywords on it. So it has cycle, regressed, or evolve. Okay? So it has the sort of shadow aspect of that word. So uncertainty, doubtful, or confident. Are you confident or are you, doubtful? Intuition, confused, clear. So we have sort of a shadow aspect and a light aspect of the keyword. And so what I've been using this deck for primarily is, what is the theme here? Or what is it that I am supposed to be learning here? What initiation am I standing at? And what is the, I'm going to use the word test for lack of a better word. Like, what is the test here? What is the thing I'm supposed to be learning and how to move through it? So I have found this really great, again, in shadow work spreads for clarity. I have not yet used this with other people, but I have a feeling that I will be. I've really, really enjoyed this deck, even though, again, it's a newer deck, so it's not like I actively resisted it for very long, but I did actively resist this deck. Okay, let's see. We got a few more decks here. So let's do this one next. So this is Pagan Otherworlds, okay? And again, this is a deck I resisted for years. And partly because it's sort of a pippish deck, and I don't love pippish decks. However, like, a lot of you know that my Ember and Aura Tarot is one of my favorites, and it's quite pippish. Like, there's the 3 of Cups. So it wasn't just that, like, that went in the con column, but it wasn't the reason. I think that the artwork is beautiful. I think that I saw it around. It's always been popular for very good reason. I think the artwork is beautiful. Here's my issue. So here's the Queen of Swords, and I do not mind at all how the the female figures are done in this deck. I do not like the faces of the men. So, like, here's the Hanged Man. Let me see if I can find another one. Here's the Chariot. This one's not too bad. King of Wands. This one's not too bad. There's something about the face of the men, like this could be a man or a woman, but, like, some of these faces, and I guess here's Justice. I just don't love how some of the people are done. Like, some of the people feel, like maybe they're wearing a mask. Or, like, something feels weird about, like, is that the Page of Wands? Like, is that a hand? So I actively resisted this deck because for that very specific reason. Like, I would see, for example, like, this image and think, wow, it's beautifully done. Or this image, like, I love how it's like this painting. I love how it has this, like, not antique-y, but like for me, there's always this, like, romanticized feeling of the tarot, like it should be old, right? Like, the images should, like, harken back to a day, like a day gone by, or like the past, or like whatever. Like tarot should be, like, old and mystical, right? And so this has that sort of older feeling to it. Like, Pagan Otherworld is, like, the perfect title for this. And then you have the Ace of Cups, though. Like, look at this ace. Look at this. This is one of my favorite, what is it, 9? Yeah, 9 of Swords. I love this. But some of the people I don't love. So I actively resisted this deck for years before I finally gave in and thought, all right, I want to give it a try. What I have come to learn about this deck is that I actually really enjoy this deck. I find it to be a very clear reader. I do not mind the people as much as I thought I would. I don't use it all that often because Most of the time when I would reach for this, I am reaching for my Darkness of Light tarot instead. I just find that, like, I'm not using it all that often. However, this is one of the only tarot decks that I personally find pairs well with my Hush tarot, and I love reading with 2 tarot decks and 1 oracle deck. I am one of those people who's generally reading with at least 3 decks, sometimes 5 decks. I'm a very messy reader. It works for me, okay? And this works great with my Hush tarot, and not a lot of tarot decks pair that well with that artwork. So, I do really love this deck. I don't use it a ton, but I do love it. I did overcome the years of resistance, and I don't regret it. I'm glad that it's in my collection. Okay, let's see, we got 3 more, so we'll be a little quick here. So, this is the Isis Oracle by Alana Fairchild. This is the next one on my deck that I resisted for a very long time. Partly because Isis is not one that I work with all that much, so she's one that's kind of in the background for me a lot, because her myth is so connected to Mary Magdalene's myth, and these types of things. So I don't work with her directly all that often. So that's part of why I resisted this deck. But also, on camera, and it may be doing this now as well, on camera, the artwork always felt flat to me and maybe like it was weirdly computer generated. The artwork just did not speak to me over the internet. I didn't see what other people were seeing in this deck. In the artwork, I didn't. I still don't when I see it on a computer screen. But then I was in like a local shop, right? And this was sitting there and I just had to have it. And I also noticed on the box, oh, here's that image, that in person, this artwork is far more beautiful. You see the brush, you see brush strokes, you see dimension. I mean, I don't know that like a paintbrush was actually used. Again, like I don't know anything about art. I don't know how the artist created these imagery. But you can see, maybe if I get it close enough, you can see so much more depth in these images when you see them in person. And so that's why I resisted this deck. So these are not decks that like I just waited to purchase, or I just felt like eventually it will be my time. Like, that's how I feel about the Kali Oracle. Like, it's just not my time right now to work with that deck. I don't have any active resistance to it. It's just not my time to work with that deck. However, I probably would feel an active resistance to it if I didn't have this deck and realize that the artwork is far more beautiful in person than I thought over the screen. So with all of these decks that I'm talking about, like, this was not just a deck that I thought, maybe someday, like, now it's just not the time, like, I don't need to add it to my collection now. I actively resisted these decks. I thought, nope, not just neutral, not just maybe someday, not just put it on the list for eventually, but actively believed I would not buy the deck because I didn't like it and didn't want to. Okay, 2 more. Tarot of the Abyss. We'll go quick with these two because you guys have heard me talk about these a lot. So I have a full review of this deck. This deck I actively resisted because it's black and white. It was my first black and white deck, and I didn't think I'd like that. That's it. I just didn't think I'd like that. I like color in my decks, and so I actively resisted purchasing this for a while. And then I finally decided, you know what, let's give it a try. It's not expensive, and other than the fact that it lacks color, I loved the images. Like, look at this lover's card, okay? Like, Anna's artwork is phenomenal in all of her decks. This is the only deck of hers I own, although her other decks are on my list for someday. But anyway, so the only reason that I actively resisted it was because it was black and white and it wasn't color. Now, I actually like that there's not color in it. I love this deck. It's on my top mass market decks for sure. It's one of my top readers when I was reading for other people. Now I pretty much am just reading for people within the context of shadow work, which this deck still does beautifully for. But I also use other decks as well. This is one of my top readers when I'm reading for other people. It's very intuitive. It is very easy to read. I actually like that it's not colored, so you can kind of have a break from that if you're wanting it. Actively resisted it. Now it's one of my top decks of all time. And then finally, this is the last one on the list, is the Witch's Tarot by Burning Paper Hearts. So this is one that, again, I've seen around. I actively resisted, mostly because I felt like it was a photography deck, and I didn't think I'd like a photography deck. Again, tarot should feel old, and photography's not old, she says with sarcasm. So I didn't think that I would like the fact that it is a photography deck. I had no idea how you were supposed to read with something like this. So, like, this is the King of Wands. Like I don't, some of these cards I get, like, I see the King of Wands here, but then, like, there's also some extra cards. Like, this is Wayne, the Mother. Like, here's Six of Swords. And, like, I do now, but at first I didn't understand, how do you read this Six of Swords? How do you read this Emperor? How do you read this Ten of Swords? In the beginning, I was very confused. So they came out with the Majors Only edition first. I never did purchase that. I actively resisted that deck for these same reasons. When the full edition came out, I resisted it, and then I felt like I had to have it all of a sudden. And very quickly after that, Lilith came through. And this has been my primary deck for communicating with Lilith and any other being of divine, like feminine being of divine darkness. So you can hear me talk more about that in my video. It's like decks for shadow work and connecting with beings of divine darkness or something like that, but I talk about this in there. So I actively resisted this deck as well. And it made my top 10 tarot deck list, which I do plan on redoing. And maybe doing like a top 10 deck, like tarot and oracle combined. But this actually did make my top 10 tarot deck because it is different. The artwork does give you a different way to get into the card. It breaks things up so you're not working with just, and I don't want to make this sound bad, but like, here's the Silver Acorn Tarot. Like, this is the Nine of Pentacles. Like, this is the Nine of Pentacles, right? Like, we all see it. The Ten of Pentacles. Like, we all see it. The Devil. Like, yes, these are different depictions of these cards, but not as different as, like, this Judgment. Okay? Or, let's see. Although I will say, I do love this Strength card. And, like, I love this World card. Anyway, so I love the deck now. My point is, I love the deck now. Actively resisted it for a very long time. Felt like I didn't understand the deck. The aesthetic wasn't for me. Didn't like the photography. Now I love everything about it. Super glad I have it. So these are the decks that I like actively resisted purchasing that I have now come to really, really love and really have a lot of gratitude for the fact that they're in my collection, and most of them have become not only instrumental parts of my collection, but would make some of my top deck lists as well. So if there's any deck here you would like to hear me talk more about, just let me know in the comments. But otherwise, that's it. I would love to know if there are decks that fit this description for you. What decks you actively resisted purchasing, and then when you finally gave in and purchased it, you were glad that you did, that the deck actively surprised you. So that is it for today, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.